That seat belongs to someone who actually earned it, so I suggest you move before this gets ugly." Victoria Ashworth's voice cut through the first-class cabin like broken glass, her perfectly manicured finger pointing directly at the woman in seat 1A. The words hung in the air with such venom that every conversation in the cabin died instantly. What Victoria didn't know was that in exactly 12 minutes, those words would destroy her multi-million-dollar empire, end her social standing forever, and land her in federal custody. The woman she was screaming at wasn't just another passenger. She was Dr. Amara Thompson, the newly appointed chairwoman of the Federal Aviation Authority, the youngest African-American woman ever to hold the position and the person who literally controlled every aircraft in American airspace. But before we see how this incredible confrontation unfolds, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe in equal treatment for every passenger, no matter what they look like, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this story ends. This is the story of what happens when entitled arrogance collides head first with quiet authority, when assumptions based on appearance meet the harsh reality of actual power. It's about a 12-minute encounter aboard Apex Airlines Flight 847 from JFK to Miami that changed everything. The date was October 15th, a crisp Thursday morning. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 777 smelled of fresh leather and expensive coffee. Outside the oval windows, the gray tarmac of John F. Kennedy International Airport buzzed with activity as ground crews prepared for the 9 a.m. departure. The cabin was nearly full, with business travelers settling into their premium seats, most absorbed in laptops and phones. In seat 1A sat Dr. Amara Thompson, 34 years old, quietly reviewing Federal Aviation Authority safety reports on her tablet. She wore a professional navy blazer over a crisp white blouse, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, small pearl earrings her only jewelry. To anyone looking, she appeared to be exactly what she was, an accomplished professional preparing for an important meeting. But Victoria Ashworth saw something entirely different when she stormed down the aisle in her $3,000 Chanel suit, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled, her Hermes bag clutched like a weapon. Victoria saw someone who didn't belong, someone who had somehow gotten access to the seat that she, Victoria Ashworth, CEO of Ashworth International Holdings, deserved more than anyone else on this aircraft. Victoria had been having the worst month of her life. Her luxury import company was hemorrhaging money her investors were fleeing, and her carefully constructed social empire was crumbling. The last thing she could tolerate was being told that seat 1A was unavailable because of some computer error that had bumped her to 2A. As Victoria approached, her eyes locked onto Amara with instant, visceral disdain. In her mind, she saw exactly what she expected to see someone who didn't deserve to be there. Dr. Amara Thompson had learned long ago that the first moments of any confrontation determine everything that follows. As Victoria's shadow fell across her workspace, Amara didn't look up immediately. She finished reading the paragraph about runway safety protocols at Miami International, made a mental note about the new regulations she'd be implementing next week, and only then raised her eyes. "Excuse me?" Amara's voice was calm, professional, with the slight tone of someone who had been interrupted while working. Victoria's jaw tightened. She wasn't used to being ignored. "You heard me. This is seat 1A. My seat. I fly first class every week, and I always sit in 1A. There's obviously been some kind of mistake." Amara set down her tablet and looked at Victoria with the measured gaze of someone accustomed to high-pressure situations. In her 3 years overseeing aviation safety for the entire Eastern Seaboard before her recent promotion, she'd faced down hostile airline executives, angry politicians, and entitled passengers who thought rules didn't apply to them. Victoria Ashworth was just another Tuesday. "I'm sorry, but this seat was assigned to me when I purchased my ticket 6 weeks ago." Amara replied, her voice steady. Perhaps you should speak with the flight crew about your seating arrangement. Victoria's face flushed red beneath her carefully applied makeup. She wasn't just angry, she was outraged by what she saw as insubordination. In her world, people like Amara moved when people like Victoria told them to move. Listen, honey, Victoria said, her voice dripping with condescension. I don't know what charity program got you this upgrade, but real passengers pay real money for these seats. So why don't you gather your things and move to whatever row you actually belong in? The insult landed exactly as Victoria intended, but Amara's expression didn't change. If anything, she looked almost curious, like a scientist observing an interesting specimen. Ma'am, I paid for this seat with my own money, and I'll be staying here for the duration of the flight. Victoria's voice rose another decibel. Your own money? Please. Look at yourself. Her eyes swept dismissively over Amara's professional but understated appearance. That blazer is off the rack. Those shoes are from Target. You're sitting in a seat that costs more than you make in a month. From across the aisle, Maria Santos, the young Hispanic flight attendant, watched the exchange with growing alarm. In her 2 years working for Apex Airlines, she'd seen difficult passengers before, but never anything quite this ugly. She approached carefully, her hands clasped in front of her, trying to project calm professionalism while her heart raced. Is there a problem here? Maria asked, her voice slightly trembling despite her efforts to remain composed. Victoria spun around. Yes, there's a problem. This woman is in my seat and I want her moved immediately. Maria glanced between the two passengers, then down at her tablet. She'd checked the manifest 3 times during boarding. The passenger in 1A was exactly who was supposed to be there. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but the passenger in seat 1A has a valid boarding pass and confirmation. You're assigned to seat 2A, which is identical in terms of service and comfort. Identical. Victoria's voice reached a new pitch. There is nothing identical about first row versus second row. I specifically requested 1A and I always get what I request. How exactly did she end up in my seat? Amara finally spoke again, her voice carrying just a hint of steel beneath the silk. Perhaps because it was never your seat to begin with. The words were quiet, but they hit Victoria like a physical blow. No one spoke to her that way. No one challenged her. No one suggested that Victoria Ashworth didn't get exactly what she wanted when she wanted it. Excuse me. Victoria stepped closer to Amara's seat, invading her personal space. Did you actually just talk back to me? Amara looked up at Victoria calmly. I stated a fact. This seat was assigned to me through the normal booking process. If you have an issue with your seat assignment, that's between you and the airline, not between you and me. Victoria's hands clenched into fists. She'd built her entire identity around being the person who gave orders, not the person who received them. The idea that this woman who clearly didn't understand the natural order of things, was refusing to bow to her authority was intolerable. We'll see about that, Victoria hissed. Maria Santos felt sweat beading on her forehead despite the cabin's perfect climate control. In flight attendant training, they'd covered difficult passengers, but the scenarios had always involved drunk businessmen or families arguing over carry-on space. They hadn't covered whatever this was becoming. Ma'am Maria said to Victoria, trying to keep her voice steady. Perhaps I can speak with the purser about upgrading your seat to our premium first-class service. We have enhanced meal options, and I don't want enhanced meal options. Victoria snapped her eyes, never leaving Amara's face. I want my seat. The seat I've been sitting in every month for the past 3 years. The seat that woman is currently occupying illegally. From seat 3B, James Parker, a 38-year-old management consultant returning from a client meeting, lowered his Financial Times. He'd been trying to ignore the commotion, but Victoria's voice had risen to the point where concentration was impossible. What he was witnessing made his stomach turn. Ma'am James called out, his British accent cutting through the tension. Perhaps you could lower your voice. This is becoming disruptive to other passengers. Victoria whirled around to face him. This is none of your concern. Mind your own business. Actually, James replied, folding his newspaper with deliberate precision, when someone is verbally abusing another passenger 3 feet from my seat, it becomes very much my concern. In seat 4, Elena Vasquez, a 29-year-old lifestyle influencer with 800,000 followers, had been documenting her first-class experience for her Instagram stories when the confrontation began. Now she found herself in the middle of what was clearly becoming a significant incident. Her journalistic instincts kicked in, and she discreetly opened her phone's camera app. Victoria turned back to Amara, her frustration boiling over. I'm not moving from this spot until you get out of my seat. I don't care if we sit here all day. Amara reached for her phone, her movements calm and deliberate. Maria, I think it would be appropriate to contact your supervisor at this point. Don't you dare call anyone, Victoria hissed. This is between us. No, Amara replied, her voice carrying a quiet authority that seemed to fill the cabin. This is between you and the airline whose policies you're violating. I'm simply a passenger trying to take my assigned seat to my destination. Elena's thumb hovered over the record button. She'd covered enough social justice stories to recognize when something significant was happening. The elegant woman in the expensive suit was clearly in the wrong, but she was doubling down instead of backing down. Elena had a feeling this was going to get much worse before it got better. Maria hurried toward the galley, her hand shaking as she reached for the phone to call David Coleman, the purser. In her earpiece, she could hear the captain's voice checking on the delay. Cabin crew, we're showing a ground hold. What's our status for pushback? We have a passenger situation in first class, Maria whispered into her mic, glancing back at Victoria, who had now positioned herself directly in the aisle, blocking other passengers from passing. Victoria's voice carried clearly throughout the cabin. I've spent more money with this airline than most people make in a year. I expect a certain level of service, and I expect my preferences to be accommodated. This woman clearly doesn't understand the way things work. James Parker had heard enough. He stood up, his 6'2" frame commanding attention. Ma'am, I work in corporate consulting. I've seen entitled executives destroy their own companies with exactly this kind of behavior. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm embarrassing myself. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm standing up for proper service standards. Some of us have earned our place in first class through hard work and success, not through whatever this is. The pause before whatever this is was loaded with implication, and everyone in earshot understood exactly what Victoria meant. Amara's expression remained perfectly composed, but something shifted in her eyes. She'd faced discrimination before, subtle comments about diversity hires, assumptions about her qualifications, the constant need to prove she belonged in every room she entered. But rarely had she encountered someone quite this blatant, quite this willing to say the quiet part out loud. Maria Amara said clearly, loud enough for the entire section to hear, I'd like to make sure this conversation is being documented. This passenger has made several statements that appear to be discriminatory in nature. Victoria's face went pale, then flushed red again. Discriminatory? How dare you play that card? This has nothing to do with... She stopped herself, realizing that finishing the sentence would only make things worse. With what Amara asked quietly. Elena, who had been listening with growing fascination, finally pressed record. She had a feeling the next few minutes were going to be important. David Coleman, the purser, appeared at Maria's shoulder. A 20-year veteran of commercial aviation, he'd seen every possible passenger conflict, but the tension in first class was unlike anything in his recent memory. The elegant woman blocking the aisle was clearly agitated. The passenger in 1A was unnaturally calm, and the other first-class passengers were watching like spectators at a tennis match. Good morning, David said, his voice carrying the authority of 2 decades managing difficult situations. I understand there's some confusion about seat assignments. Victoria turned to him with visible relief. Finally, someone with real authority had arrived. Someone who would understand the natural order of things and put this situation right. There's no confusion, Victoria said firmly. There's been an error. This woman is in seat 1A, which is my seat, and I need her moved immediately. David Coleman looked down at his tablet, scrolling through the passenger manifest with the thoroughness of someone who understood that accuracy was everything in his business. The information was crystal clear. Seat 1A was assigned to Dr. A. Thompson, confirmed and paid for 6 weeks prior. Seat 2A was assigned to V. Ashworth, a last-minute booking made 3 days ago through the airline's premium service line. Ma'am, David said to Victoria, according to our records, Seat 1A was booked and confirmed for Dr. Thompson on August 30th. Your reservation for Seat 2A was made on October 12th. The assignments appear to be correct. Victoria's mouth fell open. Dr. Thompson? She's a doctor? What kind of doctor? Her eyes swept over Amara again, this time with confused suspicion rather than outright dismissal. I fail to see how that's relevant, Amara said quietly. It's relevant because I want to know what kind of game is being played here, Victoria snapped. Are you a medical doctor? Because if you are, you certainly don't look like any doctor I've ever met. Elena, still recording, discreetly exchanged glances with James Parker. The woman was digging herself deeper with every word. James cleared his throat. Ma'am, I have to ask, what exactly do you think a doctor is supposed to look like? Victoria ignored him, focusing her attention on David. I don't care what your computer says. I've been flying with this airline for 15 years. I have platinum status. I golf with executives at your headquarters. One phone call from me and half the people working this flight could be looking for new jobs. David maintained his professional composure, but internally he was calculating the risks. Apex Airlines had been struggling with public relations lately. 2 viral videos of passenger mistreatment had cost the company millions in negative publicity. The last thing they needed was another incident. But he also couldn't simply remove a passenger from their assigned seat without cause. Amara reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. I think I should call my office and let them know I might be delayed. Your office? Victoria scoffed. What office? Where do you work? Some community clinic. Instead of answering, Amara dialed a number. Amanda, it's Dr. Thompson. I'm on Flight 847, and there's a situation developing. I may need incident documentation for discriminatory behavior by another passenger. Yes, I'll hold while you set up the recording. Elena's eyes widened. She recognized official protocols when she heard them. The calm passenger wasn't just any doctor, she was someone with access to administrative support for incident documentation. Elena adjusted her camera angle, making sure she was capturing everything. Victoria's confidence wavered slightly. Recording. What are you recording? You can't record me without my permission. Ma'am, James Parker interjected. You're on a commercial aircraft. There's no expectation of privacy for your public behavior. From her phone, a crisp female voice could be heard. Dr. Thompson, this is Amanda Foster in communications. We're recording and documenting as requested. Please proceed with your report. Victoria's face went white. She grabbed David's arm. Who is that? Who is she talking to? David gently removed Victoria's hand from his sleeve. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to return to your seat while we resolve this situation. I'm not going anywhere until someone explains to me how she has some kind of hotline to record passenger conversations. That's not normal. Normal passengers don't have administrative assistants standing by to document airline incidents. Robert Hayes, an off-duty airline executive sitting in seat 5A, had been watching the confrontation with growing concern. He recognized the patterns of a situation spiraling completely out of control. More importantly, he was beginning to suspect he knew who Dr. Thompson actually was. He stood up and walked toward the front of the cabin. "Excuse me, David. Is everything all right here?" David looked relieved to see Robert. "Mr. Hayes, we have a passenger refusing to take her assigned seat and demanding another passenger be moved." Robert looked at Amara, then at Victoria, then back at Amara. "Dr. Thompson, I apologize for the intrusion, but would you mind if I asked, are you Dr. Amara Thompson from the Federal Aviation Authority?" The cabin went dead silent. Elena nearly dropped her phone. James Parker's newspaper slipped from his fingers. Maria Santos stopped breathing. Amara looked at Robert calmly. "Yes, I am." Victoria stared at them both. Federal Aviation Authority. What is the Federal Aviation Authority? Robert's face had gone pale. "Ma'am, the FAA regulates all commercial aviation in the United States." Dr. Thompson was just confirmed as the new chairwoman last week. "Chairwoman of what, the Federal Aviation Authority?" Robert repeated slowly. "She oversees safety operations and compliance for every commercial aircraft in American airspace." Victoria looked around the cabin wildly as if trying to make sense of what she was hearing. "That's impossible. She's what?" Elena asked, her voice carrying clearly from behind her phone camera. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Every word she'd been about to say would have completed the sentence in a way that would destroy her life. Amara spoke into her phone again. "Amanda, are you getting all of this?" "Yes, Dr. Thompson. We have a complete record of the incident so far. How would you like to proceed?" David Coleman was now sweating profusely. In 20 years of commercial aviation, he'd never had the head of the federal agency that regulated his industry as a passenger, let alone a passenger being harassed by another traveler. "Ma'am," he said to Victoria, his voice now carrying a note of desperation, "I really need you to take your assigned seat immediately." Victoria looked around at the faces staring at her, the flight crew, the passengers, the off-duty executive who clearly knew something she didn't. The elegant woman in seat 1A was watching her with the same calm expression, but now Victoria was beginning to understand that the calm wasn't passive. It was the calm of someone who knew exactly how this was going to end. Victoria Ashworth had built her entire adult life around the principle that confidence and volume could overcome any obstacle. When her import business started failing, she'd simply talked louder at board meetings. When investors questioned her decisions, she'd intimidated them with her connections. When employees suggested alternative strategies, she'd reminded them who signed their paychecks. But standing in the aisle of Flight 847, surrounded by people who were looking at her with expressions ranging from horror to fascination, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced since childhood, the terrifying possibility that she might be wrong. "I don't believe you," she said, finally, her voice shaking. "Nobody in charge of aviation looks like me," Amara asked gently. "Like someone who didn't earn it." Victoria blurted out, then immediately realized what she'd just said. Elena's thumb pressed record more firmly. The woman had just said what everyone in the cabin was thinking she was thinking. James Parker stood up slowly. "Ma'am, what exactly do you mean by earn it?" "Dr. Thompson has a PhD in aerospace engineering from MIT. She's been in aviation safety for over a decade. What exactly do you think she didn't earn?" Victoria spun to face him. "Don't lecture me about qualifications. I've built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. I know what real success looks like, and it doesn't look like someone who shops at discount stores and flies on government vouchers." "Government vouchers." Robert Hayes stepped forward. "Ma'am, FAA chairwomen don't fly on vouchers. They typically use federal transportation, but Dr. Thompson chose to fly commercial. She's conducting her own quality assessment of airline service." The implications of Robert's words began to sink in around the cabin. Elena, still filming, whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Maria Santos looked like she wanted to disappear into the galley. Victoria's eyes darted between the faces, watching her finally landing on Amara. "You're assessing airline service? You're some kind of secret shopper." "I'm a passenger with a valid ticket in my assigned seat," Amara replied calmly. "The fact that I also happen to regulate the aviation industry is separate from my right to travel without harassment." Victoria's face contorted with rage and humiliation. She'd been performing her authority in front of the one person on the aircraft who had more power than anyone else on board. But instead of backing down, instead of apologizing, instead of showing any grace at all, Victoria chose to double down. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice rising to a shout. "I don't care who you think you are. I don't care what letters you have after your name. I've been flying first class since before you were out of college, and I know how things work. Money talks. Status matters. I have platinum-level membership and connections to your industry, and you're going to move to the back of the plane where you belong." The silence that followed was so complete that the only sound was the low hum of the aircraft's environmental systems. Every person in first-class passengers' flight attendants, the purser stared at Victoria with open shock. Elena's hands shook as she held her phone steady. She'd covered corporate scandals and political meltdowns for her social media channels, but she'd never witnessed someone destroy their entire life in real time with such spectacular efficiency. Maria Santos finally found her voice. "Ma'am, you need to take your seat immediately or we'll have to call security. Call security." "For what?" "For demanding the service." "I paid for—" Victoria stepped closer to Amara's seat, close enough that her shadow fell across the other woman's workspace. "I'm not moving until this situation is resolved properly." Amara looked up at Victoria with an expression that was almost gentle. "Ms. Ashworth, I'm going to give you one opportunity to step back and reconsider your approach to this situation. For your own sake." "Don't you dare threaten me," Victoria hissed. I know people who run this airline. One phone call from me and you'll be blacklisted from every carrier in the country." Ma'am Robert Hayes said urgently, "Please stop talking. You're making this exponentially worse for yourself." But Victoria was beyond hearing advice. The humiliation of being wrong, of being corrected, of being denied what she wanted had triggered something primal in her brain. She reached out and actually touched Amara's seat, gripping the leather armrest as if claiming territory. "This is my seat," she declared. "I've earned this seat. I've earned everything I have through hard work and merit, not through handouts and diversity quotas and affirmative action programs. I belong here. The help belongs in the back." The words, "the help," hung in the cabin air like toxic smoke. Elena's phone captured the moment perfectly. Victoria gripping the seat, leaning over Amara, using language that belonged in a different century. Maria Santos gasped audibly. David Coleman closed his eyes in despair. James Parker shook his head in disbelief. Robert Hayes looked like a man watching a plane crash in slow motion. But Amara remained perfectly calm. She looked at Victoria with something approaching pity, then spoke into her phone again. "Amanda, I think we have everything we need for the incident report." "Yes, Dr. Thompson. The recording is complete and has been automatically forwarded to Legal Compliance and the Transportation Security Administration." Victoria's grip on the armrest loosened slightly. "Transportation Security. What does Transportation Security have to do with anything?" Amara stood up slowly, her movement graceful and controlled. She wasn't tall, but something in her posture made her seem to fill the entire cabin. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly to every passenger. "Ms. Ashworth, you've just committed federal crimes on a commercial aircraft under the jurisdiction of the agency I chair. You've engaged in discriminatory harassment, made physical contact with another passenger, disrupted flight operations, and used language that constitutes hate speech under federal transportation law." Victoria stared at her in confusion and growing terror. "You're under arrest," The phrase "you're under arrest" echoed through the first-class cabin like a thunderclap. Victoria Ashworth's face went through a spectrum of colors: red, white, then gray as the implications began to sink in. "Arrest." Victoria's voice cracked. "You can't arrest me. You're not police. You're just a passenger. This is insane." Elena Vasquez, still recording, couldn't believe what she was witnessing. Her follower count was climbing rapidly as notifications flooded her phone. Viewers were sharing her live stream faster than she'd ever seen. The hashtag #Seatgate was already trending. "Actually," Amara said calmly, "as chairwoman of the Federal Aviation Authority, I have law enforcement jurisdiction on all commercial aircraft. But I won't be conducting the arrest personally." She pressed a button on her phone. "Amanda, please contact the Federal Air Marshal on this flight and airport security for immediate assistance." Victoria's eyes went wild, darting around the cabin as if looking for an escape route. Federal Air Marshal. There's a Federal Air Marshal on this plane. From seat 8, a man in a casual polo shirt stood up and showed a badge. "Special Agent Michael Torres, ma'am. I'm going to need you to remain calm and return to your seat while we sort this out." Elena's viewers were going crazy. The live comments were scrolling so fast she couldn't read them, but she caught fragments. "OMG. This is insane. She's going to jail. Best live stream ever." Her follower count had jumped by 50,000 in the past 10 minutes. James Parker had his own phone out now, texting his colleagues. As a management consultant who worked with Fortune 500 companies, he recognized a career-ending moment when he saw one. He'd witnessed executives destroy themselves before, but never quite this spectacularly. "Ma'am," Agent Torres said to Victoria, his voice professional but firm. "Federal regulations require all passengers to comply with crew instructions and federal law enforcement. You need to sit down." "I'm not sitting down," Victoria shrieked. "This is a setup. This is some kind of conspiracy. Normal people don't have federal agents just standing by." Maria Santos was trying to stay professional, but her hands were visibly shaking. In 2 years of flying, she'd never seen anything like this. She'd dealt with drunk passengers, crying children, even a medical emergency, but never a passenger being arrested by a federal agent. David Coleman was on his radio speaking in urgent, hushed tones to the captain. "Sir, we have a federal incident in first class. FAA chairwoman is on board and there's been a discrimination incident. Airport security is en route." From the cockpit, Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled back. "Did you say FAA chairwoman? The head of the FAA is on my aircraft." "Yes, sir. Dr. Amara Thompson, and she's just placed another passenger under citizen's arrest." Elena caught this exchange on her stream and addressed her viewers. "Guys, this is unbelievable. We have the head of aviation safety on a plane with someone who just committed what sounds like federal crimes. The captain didn't even know who was on board." The comments on Elena's stream were exploding. "Share this everywhere. Someone call the news. This woman is finished. Dr. Thompson is a queen." Victoria, realizing that everyone in the cabin was either filming her or staring at her with disgust, made a desperate attempt to regain control. "You're all being manipulated. Can't you see what's happening here? This woman is playing the victim card to get special treatment." Agent Torres stepped closer. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time to take your seat. If you continue to resist, I'll have to restrain you." "Restrain me? For what?" "For asking someone to move to their proper seat." James Parker couldn't stay silent any longer. "Ma'am, I've been recording this entire conversation. You called Dr. Thompson the help. You said she belonged in the back of the plane. You claimed she didn't earn her position. You made physical contact with her seat. That's not asking someone to move, that's harassment and assault." Victoria spun to face him. "You recorded me, without my permission." "That's illegal." "Actually, it's not," Elena called out. "Still live streaming. We're on a federal aircraft. Everything you've said and done is public record, and my 800,000 followers are watching it all happen live." Victoria's mouth fell open. 800,000 followers. You're streaming this to the entire internet, Elena confirmed. The hashtag Seatgate is trending worldwide. Your little tantrum is about to make you famous for all the wrong reasons. Robert Hayes, the off-duty airline executive, was frantically texting his contacts at Apex Airlines headquarters. The company needed to know immediately that they had a federal incident involving the head of the FAA. The public relations nightmare alone could cost millions. Dr. Thompson Roberts said, on behalf of Apex Airlines, I want to formally apologize for this incident. This is not representative of our company values or training. Amara nodded graciously. I appreciate that, Mr. Hayes. My assessment of the airline's handling of the situation will reflect the professionalism shown by your crew. Victoria overheard this and exploded again. Assessment. You're assessing the airline. This whole thing is a trap. You set this up to make me look bad, ma'am, Agent Torres said, his patience clearly wearing thin. You set yourself up. No one forced you to make discriminatory statements or harass another passenger. Elena addressed her camera. Guys, we're witnessing something historic here. This woman just destroyed her own life with her own words, and it's all being documented in real time. The viewer count on Elena's stream had reached 200,000 and was climbing rapidly. News outlets were already reaching out through her direct messages. CNN, Fox News, NBC. Everyone wanted access to the footage of what was clearly going to be a major story. Victoria noticed Elena's phone and lunged toward her. Stop filming. Stop filming right now. This is Private Agent Torres immediately stepped between them. Ma'am, that's enough. You're now physically threatening other passengers. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. What? No. You can't arrest me for having an argument. I can and I will arrest you for harassment, discrimination, assault, disrupting a federal aircraft, threatening passengers, and resisting federal law enforcement. Victoria backed against the galley wall, her eyes wide with panic. For the first time since the confrontation began, she seemed to realize that this wasn't going to end with her getting her way. This is America, she screamed. I have rights. I have money. I have lawyers. Amara stood up again, her calm presence somehow more commanding than Victoria's hysteria. Ms. Ashworth, you do have rights. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. And you have the right to be treated with dignity while in federal custody. She paused, looking directly at Victoria. Rights that you chose not to extend to me. Agent Torres was reaching for his handcuffs when Amara held up a gentle hand. Agent Torres, before you proceed with the arrest, I'd like to give Mrs. Ashworth one final opportunity to understand the gravity of her situation. Victoria's eyes darted between Amara and the federal agent, clearly trying to process what was happening. Opportunity. What kind of opportunity? Amara's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and answered immediately. This is Dr. Thompson. The voice on the other end was loud enough for several passengers to hear Dr. Thompson. This is Director Harrison Walsh from FAA headquarters. We've been monitoring the situation through Ms. Foster's office. Are you safe? I'm fine, Director Walsh. Agent Torres has the situation well in hand. Good. Dr. Thompson, I want you to know that Secretary Martinez has been briefed and the White House is aware of the incident. Transportation Security has elevated this to a federal hate crime investigation. Victoria's face went white as she realized the call was on speaker and everyone could hear it. White House. This is going to the White House. Elena's live stream was exploding with comments. She had over 300,000 viewers now, and major news networks were requesting permission to use her footage. She addressed her camera guys. This story just went from airline incident to federal case. The Secretary of Transportation and the White House are now involved, Director Walsh continued. Dr. Thompson, we're also implementing immediate protocol reviews for all major carriers based on this incident. Your assessment of Apex Airlines' response will be crucial for industry-wide policy changes. Robert Hayes looked like he was going to be sick. An FAA protocol review could result in anything from fines to route restrictions to complete operational audits. The financial implications for Apex Airlines were staggering. Director Walsh Amara said, "I want to note that the Apex Airlines crew has handled this situation professionally. The incident stems entirely from passenger behavior, not airline policies." Robert Hayes visibly sagged with relief, but Victoria's situation was getting worse by the second. Victoria finally found her voice. "This is insane. I made one little comment about seating arrangements, and now the federal government is involved. This is America." Whatever happened to free speech? Agent Torres stepped forward. "Ma'am, hate speech on federal aircraft isn't protected by free speech laws. You crossed several federal criminal lines." Elena addressed her live stream. "For everyone just joining, we're now at 400,000 viewers watching this woman face federal charges for harassing the head of aviation safety. This is the most incredible thing I've ever witnessed." Victoria's desperation was becoming palpable. "Look, maybe we can work something out. I'm willing to apologize. I'll take the other seat. Can't we just forget this happened?" Amara looked at her with something approaching sadness. "Mrs. Ashworth, you had multiple opportunities to apologize, to step back, to show basic human decency. Instead, you escalated every chance you got. But I didn't know who you were." "Exactly," James Parker called out. "You treated her that way because you thought she was powerless. That's what makes it so much worse." Victoria spun to face the cabin full of witnesses. "You're all against me. This is a conspiracy." Elena was reading comments from her live stream. "Guys, viewers are saying this video is already being shared on Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, everywhere. Someone says CNN is already preparing a breaking news segment." Director Walsh's voice continued from Amara's phone. "Dr. Thompson, media outlets are requesting statements. How would you like us to handle press inquiries?" Standard Protocol Director Walsh. "The facts speak for themselves." Victoria's breathing was becoming rapid and shallow. "Media outlets, press inquiries. You're going to ruin me over a seating dispute." "Ma'am," Agent Torres said firmly, "you ruined yourself. We're just documenting what you chose to do and say." Robert Hayes was still texting frantically with Apex Airlines corporate headquarters. He showed his phone to David Coleman. "Corporate wants to make sure Dr. Thompson knows she'll have complimentary first-class service for life and that we're implementing immediate sensitivity training for all staff." "That's very generous," Amara replied, "but unnecessary. Your crew performed exactly as they should have." Elena's phone was buzzing with interview requests. "Guys, I'm getting calls from major networks wanting to interview me about what I witnessed. This story is about to be everywhere." Victoria was now clearly having some kind of breakdown. "Stop. Stop all of this. I want to get off this plane. I want to go home." This was supposed to be a simple business trip. "Ma'am," Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom. "This is your captain speaking. We're currently holding at the gate pending resolution of a federal incident in the cabin. Airport security and federal agents are boarding the aircraft momentarily." Victoria's knees buckled slightly. "Federal agents. How many people are you bringing into this?" Amara's phone rang again. She answered immediately. "Dr. Thompson." "Dr. Thompson. This is Special Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI's Hate Crimes Division. We're coordinating with TSA and airport security. We'll be boarding your aircraft in 2 minutes." FBI. Victoria's voice was barely a whisper now. "They're bringing the FBI." Elena was practically vibrating with excitement as she updated her viewers. "This is unreal. We now have FBI boarding the plane. This woman's life is completely over." Agent Torres finally stepped forward with handcuffs. "Ma'am, you need to turn around and place your hands behind your back." "Wait," Victoria screamed. "I have information I can help you with other cases." This isn't the first time something like this has happened. The cabin went dead silent. Even Elena stopped talking to her camera. "What do you mean?" Agent Torres asked. Victoria's words came tumbling out in a rush. "There are others. Other executives, other business people who've had problems with certain types of passengers getting special treatment. We have a group. We share information about which airlines to avoid, which routes have problems." Amara and Agent Torres exchanged glances. Victoria had just admitted to being part of what sounded like an organized effort to monitor and potentially discriminate against minority passengers. "Ma'am," Agent Torres said carefully, "are you saying there's an organized effort to track and target minority passengers on commercial flights?" Victoria realized she'd just made things exponentially worse for herself. "No, I mean, we share travel tips." Elena's viewers were going absolutely wild. The comments were scrolling so fast she couldn't read them, but the general sentiment was clear. This woman had just confessed to being part of something much bigger and more sinister than a single incident. Director Walsh's voice came through Amara's phone again. "Dr. Thompson, if there's evidence of organized discrimination in commercial aviation, this becomes a much larger investigation." Victoria was now openly crying. "I want a lawyer. I want to call my lawyer right now. Ma'am, Agent Torres said you'll have access to legal counsel once you're processed. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Victoria made one last desperate plea. "Dr. Thompson, please. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. Don't let them destroy my life over this." Amara looked at her with genuine sadness. "Ms. Ashworth, I didn't destroy your life. Your choices destroyed your life. The only thing I did was refuse to let you destroy mine." The boarding door opened with a sharp pneumatic hiss, and the sound of official footsteps echoed through the jet bridge. Victoria, now handcuffed and flanked by Agent Torres, turned toward the sound with the look of a cornered animal. "Oh, God," she whispered. "This is really happening." Elena quickly addressed her camera. "Guys, federal agents are boarding the plane. We're about to see this woman led off in handcuffs. Over 500,000 people are watching this live." The first person through the door was a tall woman in a crisp FBI windbreaker, followed by 2 airport security officers and a man in a Transportation Security Administration uniform. The FBI agent surveyed the cabin, her trained eyes taking in the scene instantly. "I'm Special Agent Sarah Rodriguez, FBI Civil Rights Division. Dr. Thompson. Are you injured or in need of medical attention?" "I'm fine." "Agent Rodriguez. Thank you for responding so quickly." Agent Rodriguez's gaze shifted to Victoria. "Mrs. Ashworth. I presume." Victoria's voice was barely audible. "I want a lawyer. You'll have access to counsel. First, we need to secure the scene and interview witnesses." Agent Rodriguez turned to the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know this is disruptive to your travel plans. We'll need brief statements from anyone who witnessed the incident." James Parker immediately raised his hand. "Agent Rodriguez, I witnessed the entire confrontation from seat 3B. I also have partial audio recording on my phone. And I have the whole thing on video," Elena called out, holding up her phone. "I've been live streaming to over 600,000 viewers." Agent Rodriguez's eyebrows shot up. 600,000 viewers. This was broadcast live. "Yes, ma'am, and it's been shared across every social media platform. The hashtag Seatgate is trending globally." Victoria let out a sound that was part sob, part groan. "Globally, the whole world saw this." The TSA supervisor stepped forward. "Dr. Thompson, I'm Supervisor Williams from TSA. We've received reports that the passenger in custody may have information about organized discrimination efforts in commercial aviation. Victoria's head snapped up. I never said that. You're twisting my words. Agent Rodriguez pulled out a digital recorder. Ms. Ashworth, you're not required to speak without an attorney present, but are you willing to clarify your earlier statements about sharing information regarding certain types of passengers? Victoria looked around desperately at the faces staring at her federal agents, airline staff, passengers with phones all waiting for her answer. I can't. I need my lawyer. Elena was reading comments from her live stream to her viewers. Guys, people are saying this video is already being analyzed by news stations. Someone just posted that Victoria Ashworth is the CEO of Ashworth International Holdings, and their stock price is crashing in real time. Victoria's eyes went wide. My stock price. People are trading based on this. Robert Hayes, still frantically managing the Apex Airlines crisis, looked up from his phone. Ma'am, your company's stock has dropped 47% in the past 20 minutes. Trading has been halted. The color drained from Victoria's face completely. 47%. That's impossible. That's my entire net worth. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're continuing to hold at the gate pending completion of the federal investigation. We appreciate your patience during this unusual circumstance. Agent Rodriguez turned to Amara. Dr. Thompson, we'll need a complete statement, but given your position and the sensitive nature of this case, would you prefer to provide that at our field office? Actually, Amara said, standing up and addressing the cabin, I think there's value in providing my statement here in front of the witnesses. Transparency is important. She looked directly at Victoria. Ms. Ashworth approached my seat and immediately demanded I move. When I explained that the seat was properly assigned to me, she escalated to personal attacks about my appearance, my perceived economic status, and my right to be in first class. Victoria tried to interrupt. That's not. Agent Rodriguez held up a hand. Ma'am, Dr. Thompson is providing her statement. Please don't interrupt. Amara continued. Ms. Ashworth made several statements suggesting I had obtained my seat through charity affirmative action or as someone's mistress. She repeatedly refused to believe I could have paid for the seat legitimately. Elena was watching the comment feed on her live stream. Guy's viewers are posting screenshots of every discriminatory thing she said. This is going to be evidence in a federal case. When I remained calm and professional, Amara continued. Ms. Ashworth became increasingly aggressive. She made physical contact with my seat, invaded my personal space, and ultimately referred to me as the help, stating that I belonged in the back of the plane. Victoria was crying openly now. I didn't mean it that way. I was frustrated. I wasn't thinking clearly. Agent Rodriguez looked at her. Ms. Ashworth, how exactly did you mean it when you called Dr. Thompson the help? Victoria's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. There was no way to answer that question that wouldn't make things worse. James Parker spoke up, Agent Rodriguez. I want to add that Ms. Ashworth's behavior escalated consistently throughout the incident. She had multiple opportunities to apologize or de-escalate, and she chose to become more aggressive each time. She also mentioned, Elena added, while still recording, that she has some kind of network of people who share information about passengers they don't think belong in first class. Agent Torres, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. Agent Rodriguez, the suspect, made statements suggesting involvement in organized efforts to monitor and potentially discriminate against minority passengers on commercial flights. Victoria's lawyer's name escaped her lips, Marcus Klein. I need Marcus Klein. He handles all my corporate legal issues. Ma'am, Agent Rodriguez said corporate lawyers typically don't handle federal hate crime cases. You might want to consider criminal defense counsel. The words hate crime hit Victoria like a physical blow. Hate crime. This was a misunderstanding, an argument about seats. How is this a hate crime? Supervisor Williams from TSA opened a thick manual. "Ma'am, federal law clearly defines discriminatory harassment based on race or ethnicity aboard commercial aircraft as a hate crime. The enhanced penalties apply because this occurred in federal jurisdiction." Elena's viewer count was approaching 800,000. Guys, we're witnessing legal history here. This is going to be a landmark case for aviation civil rights. Agent Rodriguez began preparing to escort Victoria off the plane. "Ms. Ashworth, you're being arrested for federal hate crimes, harassment, disruption of a federal aircraft, and potential conspiracy charges, pending investigation of your statements regarding organized discrimination efforts." Victoria's legs buckled, and Agent Torres had to steady her. "Conspiracy. I never conspired to do anything. I just wanted my seat. The seat that was never yours," Amara said quietly. "Just like the respect you demanded but never earned." As Agent Rodriguez began reading Victoria her Miranda rights, the gravity of the situation settled over everyone in the cabin. This wasn't just a passenger dispute anymore. It was a federal case that would likely change aviation policy and set legal precedents. Elena addressed her camera one final time before the arrest. "Guys, we're about to see Victoria Ashworth led off this plane in federal custody. Her life as she knew it is over, all because she couldn't accept that a black woman belonged in first class." As Agent Rodriguez finished reading Victoria her rights, the cabin had transformed into something resembling a federal crime scene. Yellow tape wasn't necessary, but the atmosphere was unmistakably official. Every passenger was now a potential witness in what was clearly going to be a significant federal case. Victoria's desperation reached a new peak as the reality of her situation crashed over her like a tsunami. Wait. I can fix this. I can make donations. I know people in Congress. This doesn't have to ruin everything." Agent Rodriguez paused in her preparations. "Ms. Ashworth, are you attempting to offer political connections as a way to influence a federal investigation?" Victoria realized she'd just made another catastrophic error. "No, I have resources. I can make this right." "Ma'am," Agent Torres said firmly, "you can't buy your way out of federal hate crime charges." Elena was reading comments from her live stream, which had now reached over 900,000 viewers. "Guys, people are saying this woman just tried to bribe federal agents on live television. She literally cannot stop making this worse for herself." James Parker shook his head in disbelief. "In 30 years of business, I've never seen someone destroy their entire life so efficiently." Agent Rodriguez turned to address the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we escort Ms. Ashworth off the aircraft, I want to ensure we have complete witness statements. This case will likely go to federal court, and your testimony may be crucial." Maria Santos raised her trembling hand. "Agent Rodriguez, I witnessed everything from the beginning. She was aggressive and discriminatory from her very first words to Dr. Thompson." David Coleman nodded gravely. "I can confirm that Ms. Ashworth refused multiple attempts at de-escalation and became increasingly hostile when we tried to resolve the situation professionally." Victoria's voice cracked as she made one final desperate plea. "Dr. Thompson, please, I have a daughter. She's in college. If this becomes public, it'll ruin her life too. Please, show mercy." The cabin fell silent. Even Elena stopped narrating for her live stream. The mention of Victoria's daughter brought a human element to the situation that hadn't existed before. Amara stood up slowly and walked over to Victoria. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "Ms. Ashworth, I'm truly sorry that your daughter will be affected by your choices, but that's exactly why your behavior was so unacceptable." Victoria looked at her with desperate hope. "Every young person on this aircraft watching this live stream or reading about this case tomorrow needs to see that actions have consequences. They need to understand that treating people with dignity isn't optional. It's required." Amara's voice grew stronger. Your daughter will be affected, yes. But maybe she'll learn something crucial about how not to treat people. Maybe this will make her a better person than you chose to be today. Victoria's face crumpled. I wasn't always like this. I used to be better. The pressure, the business failing, the stress. I became someone I don't recognize. Elena's viewers were responding emotionally to this moment. The comments had shifted from celebration to complex discussions about accountability, consequences, and human frailty. Agent Rodriguez checked her watch. Ms. Ashworth, we need to proceed with the arrest and transport. But Amara held up her hand again. Agent Rodriguez, might I address the elephant in the room? The agent nodded. Amara turned to face the entire cabin. Everyone here has witnessed something important today. Not just a single person's breakdown, but a demonstration of how prejudice operates in our society. She looked at Victoria, then at the other passengers. Ms. Ashworth didn't wake up this morning planning to commit a hate crime. She made assumptions based on appearance. She let her sense of entitlement override her humanity. She chose aggression over empathy at every decision point. James Parker was nodding. Dr. Thompson is right. This could have ended with a simple apology at any point. But it didn't. Amara continued because Ms. Ashworth couldn't accept that someone who looked like me could legitimately belong in the same space she considered hers. Elena addressed her camera. This is incredible, guys. Dr. Thompson is using this moment to teach all of us about prejudice and power dynamics. Victoria whispered, I'm not a racist. I have black employees. I donate to charities. Ms. Ashworth, Amara replied sadly, racism isn't about what you think you are in your heart. It's about what you do with your power when you think no one important is watching. The profound truth of that statement settled over the cabin like a weight. Agent Rodriguez stepped forward again. Dr. Thompson. While I appreciate the educational value of this discussion, we do need to complete the arrest and begin processing. Amara nodded. Of course. I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that this isn't about vengeance. It's about justice. It's about ensuring that no other passenger has to endure what I experienced today. Victoria was escorted to her feet, her handcuffs clicking against the armrest of the seat she'd demanded. As Agent Rodriguez began leading her toward the aircraft door, Victoria turned back one final time. Dr. Thompson. What's going to happen to me? Amara looked at her with genuine compassion. That will depend on the courts, Miss Ashworth. But I hope whatever happens, you use this experience to become the person your daughter needs you to be. Elena's live stream was now approaching 1 million viewers. Guys were about to witness Victoria Ashworth being taken into federal custody. This has been the most incredible documentation of consequences in real time that I've ever seen. As Victoria was led past the other passengers, several of them spoke quietly. I hope you get the help you need. Your daughter will be proud of who you become after this. It's not too late to change. Victoria's tears flowed freely as she realized that even after everything she'd done, these people were showing her more humanity than she'd shown Dr. Thompson. Robert Hayes from Apex Airlines made one final statement. Dr. Thompson, on behalf of our entire company, thank you for handling this situation with such grace and professionalism. You've shown us what real leadership looks like. As Victoria disappeared through the aircraft door into federal custody, Agent Rodriguez turned back to the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll need detailed written statements from all witnesses. This case will likely set important precedents for aviation civil rights law. Elena ended her live stream with these words. We've just witnessed something historic. One woman's prejudice collided with justice, and justice won. But more importantly, we saw how dignity and composure can triumph over hate and entitlement. The cabin was quiet now, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. It was the quiet of people processing something profound, something that would change how they thought about prejudice, power, and personal responsibility for the rest of their lives. As the aircraft door closed behind Victoria and the federal agents, the first-class cabin felt like the aftermath of a storm, quiet but charged with the energy of what had just occurred. The passengers who remained sat in stunned silence, processing what they'd witnessed. Elena was the first to speak, addressing her phone camera one final time. "Guys, Victoria Ashworth has been taken into federal custody. We just watched someone destroy their entire life with their own words and actions. The stream is ending now, but this story is just beginning." She ended the live stream after nearly 2 hours of continuous broadcasting. Her phone immediately exploded with notifications, interview requests from major networks, messages from civil rights organizations, and contact attempts from legal experts wanting to discuss the case. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, the federal investigation has concluded and we've been cleared for departure. On behalf of Apex Airlines, I want to apologize for this unprecedented delay. We'll be departing for Miami shortly." David Coleman approached Dr. Thompson's seat with visible nervousness. "Dr. Thompson, I want to personally apologize for how long it took our crew to recognize the severity of the situation." Amara smiled kindly. "David, you and your team handled everything correctly. You followed protocol, you remained professional, and you supported the proper authorities when they arrived. That's exactly what should happen." "Thank you, ma'am. Is there anything at all we can do to improve your experience for the remainder of the flight?" "Just treat every passenger with the same dignity you've shown me," Amara replied. "That's all any of us really want." Robert Hayes was still on his phone with Apex Airlines corporate headquarters. He approached cautiously. "Dr. Thompson, our CEO, wanted me to convey his personal apologies and his gratitude for your professionalism throughout this incident. Please tell him that Apex Airlines crew performed admirably under extraordinary circumstances. That will be reflected in my assessment." Robert's relief was visible. "Thank you, Dr. Thompson. May I ask, will this incident affect the FAA's relationship with commercial carriers?" Amara considered the question carefully. "Mr. Hayes, what happened today wasn't an airline problem. It was a human problem. But it does highlight the need for better training in recognizing and responding to discriminatory behavior." She pulled out her tablet and made a note. "I'll be recommending enhanced civil rights training for all airline personnel, not as punishment, but as prevention." James Parker had been quiet since Victoria's arrest, but now he approached. "Dr. Thompson, I wanted to say something as a witness to everything that happened. Please, I've traveled extensively for business, probably 1,000,000 miles over the years. I've seen difficult passengers' rude behavior, even fights. But I've never seen anything quite like what Ms. Ashworth did to you." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "What struck me wasn't just how wrong she was, but how calm you remained. You never raised your voice, never lost your composure, never stooped to her level." "Thank you, James. That's very kind. But here's what really impressed me," James continued. "Even when you revealed who you were, even when you had the power to utterly destroy her, you tried to educate rather than humiliate. You showed more grace than she deserved." Maria Santos approached hesitantly. "Dr. Thompson, may I say something?" "Of course, Maria. I'm new to this job, only 2 years, and I was terrified during that whole confrontation. I didn't know what to do, how to help, or how to make it stop." Maria's voice was emotional. "But watching how you handled yourself, how you stayed professional and dignified even while being attacked, that taught me something important about strength." Elena had finished responding to media requests and overheard Maria's comment. "Dr. Thompson, if I may add something," Amara nodded. "I have a platform with nearly 1,000,000 followers. I cover social justice issues, corporate scandals, political corruption. I've seen powerful people handle confrontation in every possible way." Elena's voice grew passionate. "What you did today, using your authority to educate rather than just punish, showing compassion, even for someone who showed you none, that's leadership. Real leadership. The passengers around them were nodding in agreement. An elderly man from seat 5A spoke up. "Young lady, you've shown us all what dignity looks like under pressure." A woman across the aisle added, "My daughter is in law school. I'm going to tell her about you." Captain Rodriguez's voice returned to the intercom. "Dr. Thompson, this is Captain Rodriguez. Ma'am, it's an honor to have you aboard our aircraft. On behalf of all commercial aviation, thank you for your service to flight safety." Amara was genuinely touched by the response. "Thank you all. But I want to be clear about something important." She stood up and addressed the cabin. "What happened today wasn't about me being special or different. It was about basic human dignity. Every passenger on every flight deserves to be treated with respect regardless of what they look like or how much money they have. The real test," she continued, "isn't how we treat people when we know they have power. It's how we treat people when we think they don't." Robert Hayes was furiously taking notes. "Dr. Thompson, would you be willing to speak at our corporate diversity training sessions?" "I'd be happy to, but remember, this shouldn't be about avoiding liability or preventing lawsuits. It should be about creating an environment where every traveler feels safe and welcome." Elena raised her hand. "Dr. Thompson, the media is going to want statements about this incident. How do you plan to handle that?" Amara smiled, carefully. "This story isn't about me or even about Victoria Ashworth specifically. It's about the prejudices that still exist in our society and what happens when people think their biases won't have consequences." She pulled out her phone and checked her messages. "I have 47 interview requests already. I'll probably do 1 or 2, but the focus will be on education and prevention, not punishment or revenge." James Parker nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the right approach. Make this teachable moment count." As the aircraft finally pushed back from the gate and began taxiing toward the runway, the passengers settled back into their seats. But the atmosphere was different now, warmer, more connected. What had started as a horrific display of prejudice had somehow transformed into a powerful lesson about dignity, justice, and human decency. David Coleman made one final announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, as we prepare for takeoff, I want to thank you for your patience during today's unusual circumstances. What we witnessed today was both disturbing and inspiring. Disturbing, because it revealed prejudices that still exist, but inspiring because it showed how dignity and professionalism can triumph over hate and ignorance." As Flight 847 lifted off toward Miami, every passenger aboard knew they'd been part of something significant. They'd witnessed both the worst and best of human nature in the span of 2 hours, and they'd leave the aircraft forever changed by the experience. As Flight 847 climbed toward its cruising altitude, the passengers gradually returned their attention to laptops, books, and conversations. But there was an undercurrent of energy in the cabin that hadn't existed before the incident. A sense of shared experience and mutual respect that transcended the usual boundaries between strangers. Elena was reviewing the footage from her live stream, still somewhat in disbelief at what she'd captured. The video had been viewed over 2.5 million times in just 3 hours, shared across every social platform, and was already being analyzed by legal experts on cable news. Her phone buzzed with a text from her producer. "CNN wants you on Anderson Cooper tonight. This is huge." She looked over at Dr. Thompson, who was calmly working on her tablet as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Elena couldn't help but admire the woman's composure. Throughout the entire confrontation, Dr. Thompson had never once raised her voice, never lost her dignity, never descended to Victoria's level. James Parker was on a conference call with his firm's partners. "Yes, I witnessed the entire thing. No, she never broke character. It was the most professional handling of discrimination I've ever seen. Absolutely, we should invite her to speak at our diversity summit." He ended the call and approached Dr. Thompson again. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but how did you stay so calm through all of that?" Most people would have lost their temper within the first few minutes. Amara looked up from her work. James, when you've faced discrimination your entire career, you learn that anger only gives your attackers ammunition. Staying calm forces them to reveal their true character without you compromising your own. That's profound, James replied, and incredibly difficult to do in practice. It is, Amara agreed. But the alternative, losing control, matching their energy, descending to their level, only validates their assumptions about you. The most powerful thing you can do is remain exactly who you are while they show everyone exactly who they are. Maria Santos approached with a fresh coffee service. Dr. Thompson, would you like anything for the remainder of the flight? Thank you, Maria. The coffee is perfect. Maria hesitated, then spoke quietly. Dr. Thompson, may I tell you something personal? Of course. My grandmother immigrated from El Salvador with nothing. She cleaned offices for 40 years to put my mother through school, and my mother worked 2 jobs to put me through college. Maria's voice was emotional. When I got this job with Apex Airlines, my grandmother cried. She said her granddaughter was flying in the sky, helping people travel to their dreams. That's beautiful, Maria. What I want to say is, what you did today, how you handled yourself, it reminded me why dignity matters. You never let that woman make you smaller than you are. Amara was genuinely moved. Maria, your grandmother and mother sound like remarkable women. They raised someone special. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at cruising altitude. The flight attendants will be coming through the cabin with beverage service. Robert Hayes had finished his calls with corporate headquarters and approached Dr. Thompson. Ma'am, I've been thinking about what you said regarding civil rights training for airline personnel. Yes. Would you be willing to help us develop a comprehensive program, not just legal compliance, but genuine cultural change? Amara considered this. Robert, I'd be happy to provide input, but the program should be developed by people who understand discrimination from the inside. I can recommend some excellent consultants who've lived these experiences. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need, Robert replied. We want to get this right, not just check a box. Elena had been quiet, working on her phone, but now looked up. Dr. Thompson, if I may ask, and feel free to tell me it's too personal, but how often does this kind of thing happen to you? Amara set down her tablet. Elena, that's not too personal at all. And the answer is, more often than you might think. She looked around at the passengers who were listening. It's usually more subtle than what Ms. Ashworth did today. Assumptions about whether I can afford first-class tickets, whether I earned my position, whether I belong in certain spaces. That must be exhausting, James said. It can be. But it's also motivation. Every time someone assumes I don't belong, I work harder to excel in that space. Every time someone questions my qualifications, I make sure my work speaks louder than their doubts. Elena was taking notes. And today, when Victoria escalated to outright verbal assault, today was different because she refused every opportunity to de-escalate. Most people, when they realize they've made an error in judgment, will back down gracefully. Ms. Ashworth doubled down at every turn. David Coleman had been listening from the galley. Dr. Thompson, may I ask how we in the airline industry can do better? What should we train our crews to watch for? Amara appreciated the question. David, the key is recognizing that discrimination often starts small microaggressions, subtle disrespect, assumptions about who belongs where. By the time it escalates to what happened today, it's already gone too far. So we need to intervene earlier. Exactly. Train your crews to recognize the early warning signs and have protocols for addressing them immediately and professionally. Elena looked up from her notes. Dr. Thompson, The media is going to want to know about the broader implications of this case. What message do you want to send, Amara? Thought carefully before responding. The message isn't about punishment. It's about prevention. We need to create consequences for discriminatory behavior so severe that people think twice before acting on their prejudices. And what about Victoria Ashworth specifically? I genuinely hope she gets the help she needs to understand how destructive her worldview is. She has a daughter who's watching how this plays out. That young woman deserves better than to inherit her mother's prejudices. James Parker nodded approvingly. Even now you're thinking about rehabilitation rather than revenge. Revenge doesn't solve anything, James. Education and accountability do. Captain Rodriguez made another announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Miami. Please return your seats to their upright positions and secure any loose items. As the aircraft began its descent, Elena realized she was witnessing the end of a historic flight. Dr. Thompson, this flight will probably be studied in civil rights courses for years to come. I hope so, Amara replied. But I hope the lesson is about dignity and professionalism under pressure, not just about one person's fall from grace. Maria approached with final beverage service. Dr. Thompson, thank you for making my job easier today. You showed me what real class looks like. Maria, you handled everything perfectly. Your professionalism under pressure was impressive. Robert Hayes made one final approach. Dr. Thompson, our CEO wants to present you with a lifetime platinum membership and complimentary first-class travel. It's the least we can do after what happened today. Amara smiled. Robert, I appreciate the gesture, but I'd prefer that Apex Airlines donate an equivalent amount to civil rights organizations that work to combat discrimination in transportation. Consider it done, ma'am. As Flight 847 touched down in Miami, every passenger aboard knew they'd been part of something extraordinary. They'd witnessed prejudice collide with justice, watched dignity triumph over hatred, and seen how one person's composure could transform a moment of ugliness into a teachable experience for millions. Elena gathered her things and turned to Dr. Thompson one last time. Ma'am, thank you for letting me document what happened today. The world needed to see this. Thank you for using your platform responsibly, Elena. That kind of ethical journalism is rare and valuable. As the passengers prepared to disembark, there was a sense of completion not just of the flight, but of witnessing something that would change how they thought about prejudice power and personal responsibility for the rest of their lives. As Flight 847 arrived at the gate in Miami, the passengers began gathering their belongings, but the energy in the cabin was unlike any normal flight. Word had somehow spread throughout the aircraft about what had happened in first class, and passengers from economy were craning their necks to catch a glimpse of Dr. Thompson. Elena was organizing her footage when her phone rang. Elena, this is Jake Morrison from CNN. We need to talk to you immediately about the footage you captured. This story is exploding across every network. She stepped into the galley to take the call. Jake, I captured everything. The entire confrontation, the arrest, the federal response, all of it live-streamed to over 1 million viewers. Elena, this is going to be the biggest civil rights story of the year. Can you be in our Miami studio in 2 hours? Meanwhile, Dr. Thompson was fielding calls from FAA headquarters. Dr. Thompson, this is Director Walsh again. The Secretary of Transportation wants to discuss the policy implications of today's incident. Are you available for a conference call this evening? Of course, Director Walsh. But I want to emphasize again that Apex Airlines crew handled the situation appropriately. James Parker overheard and approached. Dr. Thompson, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but watching you protect the airline's reputation, even after what you endured, shows incredible character. James holding institutions accountable doesn't mean destroying them over individual bad actors. The goal should always be improvement, not punishment. As passengers began deplaning, something unprecedented happened. One by one, travelers from throughout the aircraft approached Dr. Thompson, not to gawk or take selfies, but to thank her. An elderly black man from coach said quietly, "Ma'am, I heard what happened up here. Thank you for standing your ground with dignity." A young Latina woman added, "Dr. Thompson, my little girl asks me sometimes why people treat us differently. Today, I can tell her about you." A white businessman from economy approached, "Ma'am, I've been in corporate America for 20 years. What you did today, staying professional while facing that kind of attack, that's leadership." Elena was documenting these interactions for her follow-up coverage. The story was evolving beyond just the confrontation with Victoria. It was becoming about how one person's dignified response to hatred could inspire an entire community. David Coleman made a final announcement. "Dr. Thompson, on behalf of Apex Airlines, it has been an honor having you aboard. Your grace under pressure today has set a standard for all of us." Robert Hayes presented her with a formal letter. "Dr. Thompson, this is from our CEO. Apex Airlines is implementing the Dr. Amara Thompson standard for civil rights response. Every crew member will be trained in the protocols you demonstrated today." Amara was genuinely touched. "That's very generous, but please just call it the dignity standard. This should be about treating all passengers with respect, not about me personally." As Dr. Thompson gathered her belongings and prepared to leave the aircraft, Captain Rodriguez appeared from the cockpit. "Dr. Thompson, in 30 years of flying, I've never been prouder to have someone aboard my aircraft. Captain Rodriguez, you run a professional operation. Thank you for supporting your crew through such an unusual situation." Elena was live streaming again this time to document Dr. Thompson's departure. "Guys, we're watching Dr. Amara Thompson leave Flight 847. This woman transformed an ugly moment of discrimination into a teachable experience for millions of people." The comments on Elena's stream were overwhelmingly positive. "She's a hero. This is what leadership looks like. Grace under pressure. She changed everything as doctor." Thompson walked through the Jet Bridge airport security. Personnel were waiting not to detain her, but to escort her safely through what was likely to be significant media attention. "Dr. Thompson, the security chief said we have reporters waiting at the gate. Are you prepared for that, or would you prefer we escort you through a private exit?" Amara considered this. "I'll speak with them briefly. The story needs to be told accurately." As she emerged into the gate area, cameras flashed and reporters surged forward with questions. "Dr. Thompson, how did you stay so calm? What message do you want to send about discrimination in aviation? Will this incident change federal policy? What do you hope happens to Victoria Ashworth?" Amara held up her hand and the crowd quieted. "I'll make one brief statement." She looked directly into the cameras. "What happened today on Flight 847 was an example of prejudice meeting consequences. But more importantly, it was a demonstration that dignity and professionalism will always triumph over hatred and entitlement. The goal isn't to destroy Ms. Ashworth, it's to ensure that no other passenger experiences what I experienced today. That requires education, accountability, and a commitment to treating every traveler with basic human dignity. Thank you." With that, Dr. Amara Thompson walked into the Miami terminal, leaving behind a changed industry and a story that would be told for generations to come. Within 6 hours of Victoria Ashworth's arrest at JFK Airport, the consequences of her 12-minute outburst began rippling across multiple industries like a financial tsunami. Elena's livestream footage had been viewed over 15 million times across all platforms. News networks were running continuous coverage with legal experts analyzing every aspect of the case. The hashtag #Seatgate was trending globally, and Victoria's name had become synonymous with entitled racism. At the offices of Ashworth International Holdings in Manhattan, chaos reigned. Victoria's assistant, Jennifer, was fielding hundreds of calls from reporters, investors, and angry customers. "I'm sorry, Ms. Ashworth is unavailable for comment." "No, I don't know when she'll return." Yes, I've seen the video. The company's board of directors had called an emergency meeting. Board Chairman Richard Patterson addressed the crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, our CEO's behavior has made our company radioactive. We're receiving cancellation notices from every major client. The numbers were staggering. In 6 hours, Ashworth International had lost contracts worth $47 million. Their largest client, a luxury hotel chain, had terminated their agreement effective immediately. 3 other major accounts had suspended all business pending review of corporate values alignment. Victoria's stock portfolio, which had been worth approximately $12 million that morning, had crashed to less than $3 million. Trading in Ashworth International stock had been halted after a 73% drop, but futures trading suggested the freefall was far from over. At the Federal Detention Center in Queens, Victoria sat in a holding cell, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of her situation. Her lawyer, Marcus Klein, had arrived within 4 hours, but his expression was grim. Victoria, I've been practicing corporate law for 25 years, and I've never seen a case this public, this documented, and this clear-cut. You committed multiple federal crimes on camera in front of 1 million witnesses. Victoria's voice was hoarse from crying. Marcus, can't we work out some kind of plea deal? Community service? A fine? Something. Marcus shook his head. Victoria, this isn't a corporate compliance issue. You committed hate crimes on federal aircraft. The evidence is overwhelming and the political pressure for prosecution is enormous. What about the business? What about my daughter's college fund? The business is essentially finished. Your personal assets will likely be frozen during the investigation. As for your daughter, Marcus paused. Victoria, her college has already received threatening messages. She's probably going to need to transfer schools and possibly change her name. Meanwhile, at the FAA headquarters in Washington, Dr. Thompson was in emergency meetings with federal transportation officials. Secretary of Transportation Maria Santos was leading the discussion. Dr. Thompson, this incident has created an unprecedented opportunity to address discrimination in commercial aviation. What are your recommendations? Secretary Santos, I propose immediate implementation of federal civil rights protocols for all commercial carriers, enhanced training, mandatory reporting procedures, and significant penalties for discrimination incidents. The President is personally interested in this case, the Secretary continued. He wants to ensure it becomes a catalyst for positive change, not just punishment. Dr. Thompson nodded. I agree completely. The focus should be on prevention and education with accountability as the enforcement mechanism. Back in Miami, Elena was preparing for her CNN interview. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing with requests from networks around the world. The footage she'd captured was being hailed as the most important civil rights documentation since the Selma marches. Anderson. This wasn't just about one racist passenger, Elena explained to Cooper's producer during pre-interview prep. This was about how prejudice operates in spaces where people think they have power and privilege. And Dr. Thompson's response? Incredible. She never lost her composure, never descended to the attacker's level, and somehow managed to turn a moment of hatred into a teachable experience for millions of people. James Parker was at Miami International Airport, waiting for his connecting flight when he was approached by a reporter from the Washington Post. Mr. Parker, you witnessed the entire confrontation. What stood out to you most? The contrast, James replied. Victoria Ashworth represented everything ugly about entitlement and prejudice. Dr. Thompson represented everything beautiful about dignity and strength. The difference was impossible to miss. Do you think this case will change anything? I hope so. If a woman can destroy her entire life with 12 minutes of racist behavior, maybe others will think twice before acting on their prejudices. At Apex Airlines headquarters, CEO Michael Foster was in crisis management mode. Robert, what's our exposure here? Robert Hayes, still shaken from witnessing the incident firsthand, provided his assessment. "Sir, actually minimal. Dr. Thompson has publicly praised our crew's response. She's been clear that this was passenger behavior, not airline policy. That's extraordinary considering what she endured. Sir, Dr. Thompson is remarkable. Even while being attacked, she protected our reputation. It shows incredible character. Victoria's daughter, Ashley, was at Georgetown University when the story broke. Within hours, she was being harassed on social media, receiving hate mail and facing calls for her expulsion from student organizations. Ashley released a statement through the university. I am horrified and ashamed by my mother's behavior. Her words and actions do not represent my values or beliefs. I am committed to learning from this tragedy and becoming a force for positive change." By midnight, Eastern Time, less than 18 hours after the incident, Victoria Ashworth's life, as she had known it, was completely destroyed. Her business was ruined, her fortune was gone, her reputation was permanently destroyed, and her family was in hiding. But Dr. Amara Thompson was just beginning to understand the platform this incident had given her to create meaningful change in civil rights and transportation policy. The wheels of federal justice moved with unprecedented speed in the Victoria Ashworth case. By Thursday morning, less than 48 hours after the incident, federal prosecutors had filed formal charges, and the case was making headlines around the world. Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Martinez held a press conference outside the federal courthouse in Manhattan. "Ladies and gentlemen, the United States government is filing the following federal charges against Victoria. Catherine Ashworth hate crimes under federal transportation law, harassment and intimidation based on racial discrimination, disruption of federal aircraft operations, and conspiracy to commit civil rights violations. The conspiracy charge was based on Victoria's statements about having a network of people who shared information about passengers they felt didn't belong in premium cabins. FBI investigators had already identified and contacted several members of what they were calling the first-class discrimination network. Elena, who was now being interviewed by networks around the clock, provided context for CNN's evening audience. Anderson, this case is moving faster than anyone expected because the evidence is so clear and so public. There's no question about what happened. We all watched it unfold in real time. Elena, walk us through what the legal experts are saying about the conspiracy charges." "That's potentially the most serious aspect, Anderson. If federal investigators can prove there was an organized effort to discriminate against minority passengers, this goes from one person's breakdown to a criminal conspiracy. The penalties could be severe." At the Federal Detention Center, Victoria was meeting with a new lawyer. Marcus Klein had referred her to a criminal defense attorney specializing in hate crimes. Attorney Patricia Williams was blunt in her assessment. "Ms. Ashworth, the prosecution has video evidence of you committing multiple federal crimes in front of 1 million witnesses. There is no defense strategy that results in acquittal. Victoria was barely recognizable from the confident CEO who had demanded seat 1A. What are my options? Plea bargaining, full cooperation with the federal investigation into the discrimination network, genuine remorse and commitment to education and rehabilitation. How much prison time are we looking at?" Patricia consulted her notes. "Federal hate crime penalties range from 1 to 10 years depending on severity and criminal history. Transportation-related charges add another 2 to 5 years. Conspiracy charges could add another 5 to 10 years. Victoria's face went white. 15 to 25 years. For an argument about airplane seats. Ms. Ashworth, this wasn't an argument. This was a documented pattern of discriminatory behavior that you admitted was part of an organized effort. The federal government takes civil rights violations very seriously. Meanwhile, Doctor, Thompson was at FAA headquarters working with federal transportation officials to develop new industry-wide protocols. Secretary Martinez was leading the working group. Dr. Thompson, the president, wants to sign comprehensive aviation civil rights legislation within 60 days. He wants this case to be the catalyst for permanent change. That's excellent, Secretary Martinez. But we need to ensure the legislation focuses on education and prevention, not just punishment. Agreed. What specific measures are you recommending? Dr. Thompson pulled out her detailed proposal. Mandatory civil rights training for all airline personnel, federal oversight of discrimination complaints, significant financial penalties for airlines that fail to protect passengers, and creation of a passenger rights database to track patterns of abuse. The airlines are going to resist the financial penalties. Then they should focus on preventing discrimination incidents. The cost of compliance will be minimal compared to the cost of lawsuits and federal investigations. Elena was interviewing James Parker for a follow-up story. James, you've had 48 hours to process what you witnessed. How has it changed your perspective, Elena? I travel constantly for business. I've seen entitled behavior before, but I've never seen someone so completely destroy their own life through pure arrogance and prejudice. What about Dr. Thompson's response? Incredible. She turned a moment of hatred into a teachable experience. She could have humiliated Victoria Ashworth, but instead she focused on education and accountability. Do you think this case will actually change anything? James was thoughtful. I think it already has. Every business executive in America has seen this footage. They know that their prejudices have consequences now. They know the world is watching. At Georgetown University, Victoria's daughter Ashley was meeting with the dean of students. Ashley, we want you to know that you have the university's full support. Your mother's actions don't reflect on you. Thank you, Dean Morrison. I want to use this experience to become an advocate for civil rights. I'm changing my major to social justice and civil rights law. That's admirable, Ashley. The university will provide any support you need. I also want to make a public statement apologizing to Dr. Thompson and announcing my commitment to fighting the kind of prejudice my mother displayed. By Friday evening, exactly 1 week after the incident, Victoria Ashworth had become a cautionary tale taught in business schools, law schools, and civil rights organizations. Her 12-minute outburst had already changed federal policy, inspired new legislation, and created a permanent record of what happens when prejudice meets accountability in the modern age. Dr. Amara Thompson, meanwhile, was becoming a symbol of grace under pressure and dignified resistance to discrimination. 1 week after Flight 847, the aftermath of the Seatgate incident continued to reshape industries, policies, and individual lives across the country. Elena's documentation of the incident had become required viewing in journalism schools, civil rights courses, and corporate diversity training programs. Major news networks were competing to hire her as a correspondent, recognizing her instinct for capturing historic moments as they unfolded. 60 Minutes had scheduled an exclusive interview with Dr. Thompson for Sunday night, promising the most comprehensive look at the woman who had become an overnight symbol of dignity under pressure. At Ashworth International Holdings, the board of directors made their final decision. Chairman Patterson addressed the emergency shareholders meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, effective immediately, Victoria, Catherine Ashworth, has been terminated as CEO and removed from the board of directors. The company will be entering Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection while we attempt to rebuild our reputation and client base. The company's assistant, Jennifer, had spent the week cleaning out Victoria's office. Among the papers she found was a folder labeled Problem Passengers, a collection of notes about minority travelers in first-class cabins, complete with photos, seat numbers, and derogatory comments. Jennifer immediately turned the folder over to FBI investigators, providing crucial evidence for the conspiracy charges. Federal prosecutors were building a case that extended far beyond Victoria's individual actions. Special Agent Rodriguez was leading the investigation into what they now called the Premium Cabin Discrimination Network. We've identified 14 individuals across 6 cities who were part of this informal network Agent Rodriguez reported to her supervisor. They shared information, photos, and strategies for complaining about minority passengers in first-class accommodations. How deep does this go? Deep enough to constitute organized conspiracy to violate civil rights. We're looking at RICO charges for the entire network. Dr. Thompson was in Washington meeting with congressional leaders about the proposed Aviation Civil Rights Act. Senator Patricia Williams, chair of the Transportation Committee, was leading the discussion. Dr. Thompson, this legislation has bipartisan support, thanks to the public reaction to your case. When can we expect implementation? Senator Williams, I recommend a 90-day implementation period for major carriers with full compliance required within 6 months. Airlines need time to develop proper training programs, and the enforcement mechanisms, federal oversight, significant financial penalties, and criminal charges for willful violations. The message needs to be clear. Discrimination on commercial aircraft will not be tolerated. Elena was preparing for her CNN special report when she received a call from an unexpected source. Elena, this is Ashley Ashworth, Victoria's daughter. Elena was surprised. Ashley, I'm so sorry for what you're going through. Elena, I want to thank you for documenting what happened. As horrifying as it's been for my family, the world needed to see who my mother really was. Ashley, that's very mature of you. I'm starting a foundation focused on civil rights education and fighting discrimination in transportation. I want to use my mother's failure as a teaching tool. What will you call it? The Dignity Foundation. Inspired by Dr. Thompson's example. At the Federal Detention Center, Victoria was serving the first week of what would likely be many years in federal prison. She'd pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence of 8 years, but the conspiracy charges were still pending. Her cellmate, a woman convicted of tax evasion, asked about the constant media attention. Victoria, why is your case such a big deal? People say racist stuff every day. Victoria, now wearing standard prison clothing and looking haggard, replied quietly, because I said it to the wrong person, and because someone filmed it, and because I couldn't stop making it worse. You sound different than on the videos. Prison has a way of clarifying what really matters. I spent my whole life thinking I was better than other people because of my money and status. Turns out I was worse than most people because of my character. James Parker was at his office in London, leading a diversity training session for his consulting firm's partners. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to share with you what I witnessed on Flight 847. It was a masterclass in how to handle discrimination with dignity and how to destroy yourself with arrogance. He showed Elena's footage to the group. This is what happens when prejudice meets consequences in the social media age, and this is what leadership looks like under pressure. The ripple effects of 12 minutes of hatred were still spreading, changing policies, laws, and individual lives across multiple continents. 6 months after the Seatgate incident, the long-term consequences had fundamentally transformed multiple aspects of American society, from federal policy to corporate culture to individual accountability. The Aviation Civil Rights Act, signed by the President in a Rose Garden ceremony with Dr. Thompson at his side, had become the most comprehensive transportation discrimination legislation in U.S. history. Every commercial airline now operated under strict federal oversight with mandatory civil rights training and severe penalties for discrimination incidents. Dr. Thompson, who had been promoted to Secretary of Transportation following the incident, addressed the National Civil Rights Conference. The Seatgate case taught us that documentation and accountability are the most powerful tools against discrimination. When prejudice can't hide in darkness, it withers in the light. Elena had parlayed her documentation of the incident into a career as a civil rights correspondent for CNN. Her documentary about the case, 12 Minutes, How Prejudice Destroyed a Life, had won a Peabody Award and was being used in educational institutions worldwide. The power of that footage, Elena explained to journalism students at Columbia University, wasn't just that it captured discrimination happening, but that it showed the complete arc of consequences in real time. People saw that actions have immediate devastating results. Victoria Ashworth was serving her sentence at a minimum security federal prison in Pennsylvania, working in the library and taking courses in social justice and civil rights history. She had become an unexpected advocate for discrimination awareness among her fellow inmates. I spent 42 years thinking my money and status made me better than other people, Victoria told a prison counselor during a recorded session that would later be used for educational purposes. It took 12 minutes to learn that character is the only currency that matters. Her daughter Ashley had indeed started the Dignity Foundation, which had become a leading organization in transportation civil rights education. Ashley spoke at universities across the country, sharing the painful lesson of her mother's fall from grace. My mother's failure taught me that prejudice isn't just morally wrong, it's self-destructive, Ashley told a gathering at Harvard Law School. Discrimination doesn't just harm its victims, it destroys the people who practice it. The discrimination network that investigators had uncovered through Victoria's case had led to federal charges against 43 individuals across 12 states. The premium cabin conspiracy had resulted in the largest civil rights prosecution in transportation history. James Parker had written a book about the incident called Dignity Under Pressure Lessons from Flight 847. The book had become required reading in business schools and corporate leadership programs worldwide. Dr. Thompson showed us that true authority doesn't need to announce itself, James wrote in the conclusion. It demonstrates itself through character, composure, and commitment to justice. Apex Airlines had become the industry leader in civil rights compliance with the Dr. Amara Thompson standards, being adopted by airlines globally. CEO Michael Foster credited the incident with transforming his company's culture. That terrible day on Flight 847 forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about discrimination in our industry, Foster said at an industry conference. But Dr. Thompson's response showed us how to turn crisis into opportunity for positive change. The flight crew from that day had become advocates for civil rights in aviation. Maria Santos now led Apex Airlines' civil rights training program, teaching other flight attendants how to recognize and respond to discrimination. Dr. Thompson showed me that staying professional doesn't mean staying silent, Maria told new airline employees. Sometimes the most professional thing you can do is stand up for what's right. 3 years after the incident, Victoria's prison library work had led to her developing a comprehensive curriculum on the consequences of discrimination. The program was being implemented in federal prisons nationwide. I can't undo what I did, Victoria said in her first television interview since the incident conducted from prison, but I can make sure others learn from my failure. Prejudice is a choice, and choices have consequences. The ripple effects of 12 minutes of documented hatred had created waves of positive change that would continue for generations, proving that sometimes the worst of human behavior can inspire the best of human response. 5 years after Flight 847. Dr. Amara Thompson stood in the Rose Garden again this time as the president introduced her as his nominee for the Supreme Court of the United States. The journey from a discriminated against passenger to the nation's highest court embodied the power of dignity in the face of hatred. Dr. Thompson represents the very best of American justice, the president announced. Her response to prejudice with grace, to hatred with education, and to attack with accountability has inspired a generation of leaders. Elena, now a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, covered the nomination announcement. In her report, she reflected on the woman she'd watched maintain perfect composure while being verbally assaulted. 5 years ago, we watched Dr. Thompson refuse to let hatred change who she was. Today, we see how that refusal changed who we all could become. Ashley Ashworth, now a federal prosecutor specializing in civil rights cases, watched the announcement with pride. Dr. Thompson showed me that you honor victims of discrimination not through revenge but through justice. not through destruction but through transformation. Victoria Ashworth, granted early release for her exemplary prison education work, watched the same announcement from a small apartment in Pennsylvania. She'd lost everything. She'd once valued money status, social position, but found something she'd never possessed: genuine humility and purpose. Dr. Thompson could have destroyed me completely that day, Victoria told her parole officer. Instead, she gave me the opportunity to rebuild myself as a better person. That's the real measure of her character. In her acceptance speech, Dr. Thompson addressed the nation. 5 years ago, I was just a passenger trying to take my assigned seat. Today, I'm honored to be nominated for a seat on our nation's highest court. The journey between those two seats was paved by the understanding that dignity and justice are not privileges to be earned, they are rights to be protected. She looked directly into the camera. To every person who has ever been told they don't belong somewhere they've earned the right to be, stand tall, speak truth, and never let others' prejudices dim your light. The arc of justice is long, but it bends toward dignity, respect, and equal treatment for all. As Dr. Thompson walked back into the White House surrounded by family and supporters, the lesson of Flight 847 was complete grace under pressure doesn't just protect the individual, it transforms the world. Friends, I've covered hundreds of these stories over the years, but this one hits different. What Dr. Amara Thompson showed us that day wasn't just about having power. It was about how you use it when you think no one important is watching. Victoria Ashworth thought she could humiliate someone she saw as powerless. Instead, she humiliated herself in front of the entire world. But here's what struck me most: even when Dr. Thompson revealed who she truly was, even when she had the power to completely destroy Victoria's life, she chose education over revenge. She chose to build rather than tear down. The lesson here isn't that we all need to be Supreme Court nominees to stand up to discrimination. It's that dignity and composure will always outlast arrogance and entitlement. Victoria lost everything because she couldn't show basic human decency. Dr. Thompson gained everything because she never abandoned her principles even under attack. Next time someone underestimates you or treats you like you don't belong, remember Flight 847. Stay calm. Document everything, let them reveal their true character, while you maintain yours. The world is watching, and justice has a way of finding those who think they're above it. Keep standing up for what's right, and I'll keep bringing you these stories of courage, consequences, and the power of human dignity.